Elisabeth, you had a profound near-death experience at a very young age. What was the background to this and how did it come about? Well, it began in my childhood. I am a country girl, you see, so I grew up in a small village. And even as a young child, I witnessed the deceased in the village being taken away by a black carriage drawn by two black horses. This always impressed me greatly, so I have always been somewhat interested in the issue, because the sight of this carriage with those black horses always captivated me. The school I attended was, in fact, right next to the church. Back then, the deceased were mostly laid out in the mortuary in an open coffin. This was a place I was drawn to, and I was so fascinated by the peaceful faces of these deceased people. I was only 5 years old when my 8-year-old brother died, and after quite a period of sickness. Back then, they didn't take me to the funeral, saying this would be better for me. For me, my brother was suddenly gone, yet no one ever talked about it again. Later on, I accompanied my grandfather before he died. Well, he was quite old back then, and pain was no stranger to me. I also accompanied my father for several months when he too fell seriously ill. Back then, there were no palliative care units or anything like that. So the last 3 months he was in hospital were difficult, and I was truly relieved when he passed on. And in this case, I felt it was normal. Shortly after my friend at the time died, we had planned to get married, but he died very quickly, unexpectedly, and quite tragically. For me, it somehow dragged me down. Why me? And why now? I thought. We were still so young. We still wanted to live. I felt like I was facing a wall. Yet I just kept going. Though I wasn't really taking things in anymore, I threw myself into my work, viewing many things only from the outside. I no longer wanted to deal with this issue. I no longer wanted to deal with this issue that much. I simply ignored it. But then I myself became ill also. I had to have some serious surgeries. And when you are told by the doctors to just keep enjoying your life, however, you do that, because who knows how long you'll live. One of them even told me that if I lived to be 30, that would be a lot. Back then, I was 26 or 27 years old. I consciously was living toward this 30th birthday, wondering what will happen. Will I die? Won't I die? Will I survive it? For me, I have to say, it was somehow a bit exciting. And then it indeed was before my 30th birthday that I became quite ill. So my mother had to call the emergency doctor, who said, "It's better, let her die at home," I heard him say. At that moment, I have to admit, I was really angry. How can he claim that I'm dying? He can't do that, I thought, even though I felt very tired, exhausted, and weak. And a very strange feeling came over me, as if someone was pulling something out of my feet, my body, therefore, getting more and more empty from the top down. So I grew colder. A feeling of fear came over me. I had become really anxious. On top of that, I found myself in a dark tunnel and was simply pulled through it without being able to counteract. At the end of the tunnel, suddenly, a kind of warm light appeared, slightly permeated with color. There I felt a love, a well-being, freed from pain. I felt so comfortable and cared for. I was no longer afraid. It was a love I had never felt before. Then I also saw my father. What is my father doing there? He's already dead, I thought. I saw my father as a figure of light, a wonderful light imbued with colors. He was not a human being, as on earth, but a figure of light. He reached out his hand to me. The hand was quite large, and I knew that once I took it, I probably wouldn't be coming back. So I turned away then, partly because my mother was sitting by my bed, weeping. Then a mental image flashed before my eyes. It said, well, she's already lost my brother. Her mother died shortly after her wedding, her father, her husband. So if I leave now, she will be alone, I thought. But I felt so comfortable in this light, and I turned around. I want to go to my father, I thought. But just in that moment, he withdrew his hand. First, I was disappointed, wondering why he had withdrawn his hand. I wanted to stay there, for it was such a great feeling without this pain, so free, so beloved. But the path simply led back. I felt my body was no longer in this tunnel. Instead, I felt I was directly pulled back into my body, and I couldn't resist. I think I can sleep now. Everything is fine now, I said to my mother, when realizing that I was in my body. I think I slept for quite a long time, and when I woke up, I felt that this experience was difficult to put into words. Therefore, I would just simply speak of this love, this well-being, this lightness, of being freed from pain. As for me, I never experienced anything like this before in my life, and I was sure I had not just imagined or dreamt it, but it was in fact true and real to me. So I asked myself for an answer. May I come back to the encounter with your father? You said he appeared to you as a figure of light. Just how did you recognize your father? What was the decisive element? I just simply recognized him. He was not like he was as a human being on earth, wearing a suit and having a face. Instead, he was a figure of light. I did not see any facial features, nor eyes, nor the like. He was simply a kind of figure of light, an infinitely warm light imbued with color. I knew it immediately. But you saw his hand. I saw his hand, yes, but I knew at that moment that if I took it, I would never come back. I would stay over there. For me, this was somehow confirmation that I was standing on the border between our world and the hereafter. How long did it take to recover from this illness after your experience? This took quite some time, and I was pretty exhausted afterwards. Moreover, I wanted to delve into the matter because I knew it was true and it was real. I wanted to know what it was. I had no idea. I just wanted to do some research. But I realized that among my friends, back then at the age of 30, talking about a topic like life, death, and dying was not very popular nor relevant. Back then, there was no internet either to look up what had happened to me and what this might be. I started reading books, but back then there wasn't any clear literature on the subject. I was looking for something which made sense for me, but I couldn't find it. I then gave up on the topic because I was unsure. It somehow faded into the background. Then there were ups and downs of my health. Then suddenly, in the night, it felt as if someone was calling me or touching or stroking my cheek. Once there was even a pinch on my cheek. Then, one very exceptional night, I felt this pinch very clearly. I heard my pet name very loudly, the one my fiancé back then used to call me. When I got up, I felt like I wasn't normal anymore, that something was wrong. At the time, I was with my mom, who told me that that afternoon there was a TV program about a medium. If I knew what a medium was, it seemed interesting, so we should watch it. I watched the program. Thereafter, I knew that there was indeed something to it. So I felt normal once again. I wanted to pursue this matter and tried to contact the medium. And I actually got this contact, and I met this medium who also offered training. I was as well truly confronted with my deceased loved ones for the first time. I was so stunned that I could say neither yes nor no, because everything she told me somehow overwhelmed me. She recommended I attend such seminars if possible. She felt that I was sensitive, and so I replied that I had to go home first to process all of this. For me, it was somehow, well, it all happened so fast for me. Finally, I called her and met her again. We had some really good talks, and I then attended some seminars. I attended lectures and I read books. And that's how I was guided to the spiritual path that helped me greatly to emerge from this grief, from this state of being, by seeing a different meaning in life. Gradually, I indeed began to feel healthier. Well, I've never been as fit as the others, but I still managed to pull through. So all of this was a great help that I was given. You also had an exceptional experience with your deceased dog. Yes, I got a dog from the animal shelter. It was my first dog, and we did a lot together. It always helped me to get through relapses or illnesses, and I must say it gave me a lot of strength. This showing me how much power such an animal can give you. I had this dog for almost 12 years until she became very ill. Back then, my practice was on the ground floor, so when she could no longer climb stairs, I slept together with her on a mattress downstairs for almost 4 months. During the day, I put her in the trunk of my car where she loved to lie because she could look down at the street from there. At night, I spoke to her for a long time. I told her about my near-death experiences, about who was already over there, that she, too, would be picked up. Please, Susie, when you're over there, I used to say, just let me know if there is life after death also for you. I just want to know how you're doing over there. Please, just give me any sign I can understand. So on November 1st, I had to have her put down. That same night, I had a very intense dream about her. She stood on top of a hill, somewhere in a meadow, just as she was when she was still healthy, quite fresh and lively. Look there, the clumsy dog is rolling, she kept saying. What's that? I wondered. Then I saw a kind of woolly brown ball fall from there into the meadow. Look, look, the clumsy dog is rolling around again. I wondered what this meant. I couldn't figure it out until I remembered an acquaintance in Vienna whose dog had died some time ago. I didn't know this dog. I called him, asking him if he could make sense of it. As I felt this had something to do with him, he immediately started crying and asked me how I knew. This was my dog, a dachshund, he said. When we went for walks, the dog would always stand on top of the hill in a meadow, curl up into a little ball, and then roll down the hill like a ball. So I kept telling the dog that it would roll around clownishly. Moreover, he said I couldn't have known that because I didn't know the dog at all. On the second night, I had another dream about my dog, where she showed me a young girl on a horse, a Lipizzaner, wearing a beautiful sissy-style dress. She stood there, looking up, admiring her, and again I wondered what this could mean. Then I remembered an acquaintance whose daughter died at a young age. They had 2 horses near the riding stable, and I called her to ask if she could make sense of this vision. She asked me to describe the horse, which I did. Then she said that it had to be put down 2 days before, and that her daughter had known the horse back then. Well, as to this sissy dress, She always wanted to have a sissy dress. She was a sissy fan, and she always talked about a very beautiful sissy dress. I am convinced that these two messages came from my dog. I knew nothing about it at all before. It all was confirmed by my friends afterwards. There were no further messages. Sure, sometimes you perceive something, but these two experiences were clear, reassuring me that Susie was still alive over there. I had still another experience with her. I was also accompanying my cousin, so I was sitting with her because we knew she didn't have much longer to live. She was dying. She kept looking toward a certain corner of the room and began pointing up there. What's up there? I asked her. Look, there, Susie is over there, she replied. Susie? Yes, look, Susie, the clever dog. She was such an intelligent dog, she said. You could go with Susie, I proposed. She looked at me. No, I don't want to go just yet. This happened late in the evening, and on the next day, she passed on. Susie always had a very good relationship with my cousin. She was always happy when she was with her. And so for me, this was a sign that even animals come to pick us up when we pass away. It was then a deathbed vision, so to speak, when she saw the deceased dog instead of the relatives. That's right. I am Susie's aunt, she used to say. She was living in the neighborhood, and whenever I brought Susie to her, she was so happy. Susie was her dog. Well, I must say, the fact that Susie came to pick her up was a confirmation for me that animals as well come to pick us up. Elisabeth, what impact did all these occurrences and experience have on your worldview? I must say it changed significantly in that I became much calmer and more relaxed. Something simply no longer upset me that much. Now I know it's just not worth it. My fear of dying, of death, has been taken away, and I just know that I will be picked up and that it's nice to know that someone will come for you. I don't know whether my loved ones who have died before me will pick me up or my animals. I want to take away people's fear of dying, offering them somehow help in their grief over the loss by telling them that there is life after death, that we are not alone. The deceased are always watching over us or are always somehow in contact with us. They are sending us signs. I didn't understand this so easily before. I wasn't as aware of it as I am now. And sometimes there are certain signs showing me that I am not alone. Elisabeth, I want to thank you very much for the interview.